I didn't really have a plan to go into the military. I was actually on the track to go to college, become an engineer. That's what my dad's education was. And I kind of had a mistaken mindset about the military. It was kind of like, oh, that's something that you do when you're too dumb to get into college. And I think it's a similar stigma might be around construction.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Nathan.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you. So Nathan Spearing, he's owner of Transform NC. And I got to say, we met, for the first time in person a couple months ago at the Coalition Summit. And all of us left impressed by you, Nathan. So I'll give you that.
It was a short time we worked together, so I could keep it together long enough and keep you all impressed.
No, if you don't mind, I'd never start this personal on things, but if I can give you some credit, the summit and it's changed over the years. Like previously we do it during the week. Now it's over the weekend. We found that a lot of the people that attend, most everyone's a small business owner, right? And so to be away from your office on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with the phone ringing all day, it's really hard for them to run their business. And they've asked to do it like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because then it's a little quieter and they can really focus. And I'll give you credit. I mean, we're not going to get all religious, but what I'll say is that you actually stepped away on Sunday to, attend, something that's very important to you and your family. And to me, not just from your military background, but I think it says a lot about someone, whether you're religious or not, to have commitments or things that you're passionate about, and that that's something that drives you.
Yeah, I think the adage of if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so I think that in my military career, I had a atypical background growing up, homeschooled, oldest of 7 kids. But I got some advice pretty early on that you just need to put your beliefs kind of on your sleeve. So I think that a lot of people will kind of try to keep the personal aspect of who they are kind of on the back burner. And I think that there is definitely something to being professional and letting your work speak for itself. But at the same time, and I think we talked about it a little bit, just the reality is our business reflects who we are at a deep level. And so we don't need to be necessarily ashamed of that or hiding from that. And even just realizing that clients that I want to work for are okay with somebody that's principled and is of conviction, even if we differ. I mean, I've had some really great clients that we're probably very far away from each other politically, but they were also some of the most, I respected them as people a lot more than maybe some people that would hold my beliefs. They were professional. They were great to work with. And I think that's the benefit of what we do as well. A lot of what we do is in person. We're in people's homes. We're face to face. And so we get the humanity of it is not going away anytime soon. And so just embracing that and realizing that we're people serving, and I very much view my business as an extension of my family. And the way that societies used to be structured was a lot more villages. There were certain landowners and things like that had more means to actually as a means of provision for a larger group of people. And so it's not necessarily that way, the way that society is structured in post-industrial revolution, but I still kind of have that traditional view of if you're employed by me or you're working with me, even our trade partners, like I try to view that as family members. And then we're going in and we're doing residential remodels, so that's serving another family, our family serving your family, and having that focus, I feel like is really what drives what I do at a fundamental level. Being passionate about home, being passionate about hospitality, and then trying to understand our clients' family rhythms and create space that enables that. And it's a lot easier to be who you are authentically than to try to pretend to be something that you think each client wants you to be.
I'm not sure how to add on to this, Nathan. Like, I think, I think that's so well said and spoken. I mean, I'm just sitting there listening to you, and I'm like, I think I could listen to Nathan this whole episode. I think our listeners agree. Just you take the next 60 minutes. But what's interesting about the authenticity side is, again, kind of what you mentioned early on. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, right? And it's easy to be, call it, carried by the winds of the moment, whatever they may be. And credit to you. I mean, look, for what it's worth, it's not like Nathan went around the corner. I mean, we're in Boston. If I'm not mistaken, you took a 45-minute Uber Lyft or an hour Lyft out,
Yeah.
went to your service, did the same thing back, still attended, later, but you had your commitment, so you didn't move to. And it's not like you even said what those were, right? And so you could be passionate about something and stand for something without it feeling like, oh, Nathan's trying to push me one way. And you bring up the political side, which I think is very interesting because, right, we're in a very toxic culture politically. I mean, uh, and I just think, a lot of us have kind of missed this human element, right? There's a human element to all of this stuff, including um, the business we run. So many times it becomes a transaction. And the problem in construction for you and I, Nathan, and the reason why I want to touch on the authenticity is because there's something to be said when there is a personal relationship with the projects we do. We're building things that are very professional. Or very emotional, is what I mean to say. Is that clients are spending a lot of money, a lot of time on a remodel, on a new build, and to have more of a personal level, whether it be value, whether it be family, that you're bringing to the table. I think it really softens communication in a lot of ways. Not all people, but most people.
Yeah, I can remember probably about a year and a half ago, I had some clients start to give the signal that things were not okay. And I am fortunate. I have a great relationship with my plumber. He's been in business probably 10, 15 years longer than me, also a man of faith. And I kind of reached out. I'm like, this is I can tell something's going on here. And he said, just get together with them and just say, hey, what's going on? And then he's like, and then Nathan, listen. He's like, don't talk. He's like, you got the gift of gab. You may be able to have to justify it, whatever. He's like, just give them space to talk about what's going on. And whatever they say, just say, yeah, okay, you've given me a lot to think about, whatever. If they get hostile, they get whatever, just really just let them completely get everything off their chest and don't try to justify anything and just say, hey. And so I brought them into the conference room and I said, hey guys, what's going on? You know, and I can tell like there's a different tone here. It was the remodel went longer, cost more. And so I had also heard that one of the signs was my electrician called and said, hey, a client called me and want to know if I got paid, and and I was like, okay, So I said, hey guys, let's meet at the office and what's going on. And they said, hey, our neighbor got into this remodel and they're in a lawsuit right now. And the contractor didn't pay any of the subcontractors for the last several months. And we just kind of feel like that's what's going on here. And I just said, hey guys, look at me right in the eyes. I said, zero chance that's going to happen. So our families are going to see each other in the grocery store. We're going to be at the Christmas tree farm. We'll be at the country club. Not going to happen, and you could just like visually see them just be like, oh, like, and I made them feel it. And it was personal, eyes to eye. And I had, had Legos in my office cause I got kids. So I get the Legos out and let their kid play at the Legos, just, kind of under the conference table playing with the Legos. And so I think that's anytime that there is some friction, and I guess maybe that's where my military background, I'm just like, I'm moving to the sound of the gun, let's go. I'm going to go into their conference room. I'll go into their house. I'll go to wherever it is. Like we're going to sit down at a table together. We're going to be there. The fullness of communication is going to be, and we're just going to talk about it. And we're going to come up with a solution. And that really in the era that we're in, people can shoot a text message or a email out that is, I think depending on the methodology that you follow, it's like 7% of communication is the actual contents of the words that you say. And so when you do that via text or email, it's 7% of communication is being, and so just extending the the grace to the clients that they maybe didn't mean it that way, and then realize that certain stuff just needs to not be said via email. Or I mean, you definitely have to have stuff in writing. You definitely have to, but try, I usually try to have the conversation personally and then summarize afterwards. And because when you send a email and you try to define an agenda, especially when things are heightened, it's just not the right tone. And so I literally will just go and fortunately, we talk about at the summit. I love that you do the client roller coaster, and just
Mhm.
being in tune with what's going on with the client and what's going on in their life, and realizing that it's not necessarily standard for them to act a certain way. And so to read through it and say maybe there's something different going on, and really finding out like that there's actually some personal stress happening in their life that is not even related to the remodel, maybe. And a lot of times it is related to the remodel. So that's unfortunately is a hard lesson to learn, because it's very easy to have that mutually assured destruction and CC the lawyer and everybody. And I just have basically will push back from the table and just say, hey, I'm coming over. And and also, like, I'm a special operations guy, so it's not, I'm not rolling in there with my guns locked and loaded, ready to, like, I'm coming into there, and that's why I like to even do it at their place. I'm going to come into some place you're comfortable. I'm going to expose myself, and we're going to have the conversation person to person, and almost always the tone is completely different. And it's very hard, for most people are not jerks. Most people are reasonable, but on circumstances, specifically with renovations that take longer and cost more, the all the conditions are right to bring out the wrong side of people, and that's ultimately what being a professional is about, is being able to remain emotionally empathetic to them, and listen, and let them kind of get it off their chest, and not feel the need to escalate back, and to just say, hey, you've given, in like my plumber said, you've given me a lot to think about. I'd like to take some time to just reflect on what you said, and I'm gonna be in touch tomorrow, next day, whatever. Um, and those are, unfortunately, it shouldn't take us. It took me 5-6 years of business to really kind of hone in on that, and then I can still be tempted to get on my thumbs and just, oh yeah, I got a zinger for you, and so I usually try to have those conversations, let my wife get that, um, and let my zinger out, and then take a couple breaths, acknowledge, hey, let's talk about this, and that is the burden that we talked about that at the summit, that you shared a story too, where it was that things kind of got heightened, and you got to be professional, and you may never get an apology from the client. They may never acknowledge, yeah, I was a little bit, because it takes a lot of humility to be like, hey, I'm sorry, I was overreacting. You're right. We can, and just, I don't need it. Like, you're paying me money to do a service. Part of that service includes me not needing to get an apology from you, me not needing you to say that I was right, and to get you done, get your permits finalized out, get you moved in, and then go back maybe and adjust our intake process to never hire that particular personality again. But to get them done, and even if it's at a cost sometimes to you and your business, get them finished up, and move on. And so those are hard lessons to learn, and it takes some reps of kind of royally screwing that up before you can really even do it. And even then, you always have to be vigilant to not do it, and to be the professional.
It's funny you say that because it takes practice, right? I think early back in my career, I was pretty defensive on a lot of things, right? And I think as you get older in life and business, you realize it's not about being right, it's about getting it right. And it could mean many things, like whether it's the final outcome that's right, whether it's maybe we're conceding in something, not dying on this hill, right? Live for
Hmm.
the next day. I think there's a lot of variables in negotiation, but the example I have is a mentor of mine, probably right before when I was starting AFT, Dave Clark, I I had attended with him in a lot of business transactions and meetings, early on in my career. And on occasion, these would be very tense. Things being miscommunicated, as you mentioned, Nathan. I mean, when you're dealing with high dollars, like any transaction, there things can go sideways. Maybe it's lack of performance. There are a lot of different scenarios why these meetings would be had, right? And every time he would come into these meetings, even if he was right, even if there was a point that had to be made, he never went in with an agenda. And what I mean by that is he would always just start out like, "How you doing, Nathan? How's the family?" It'd be this common ground where you could see the other person was ready to fight him, just from an argument standpoint or be very defensive. And he would just take your guard down because he would have a smile, and not in this like condescending way, but just in like, "Hey, at the end of the day, I care about you and I want the best outcome here." And so you would see that this would just be alleviated. And then we'd get to the core of the issue, figure it out, move forward. And even case in point, there was someone that wasn't performing that he had to terminate. It was a really tough termination, but the way it was handled, it's like the person left like hugging him. And so the point being is that I, this is something I strive to do. I'm sure my team would say the same. Like as we've been in some of these tense meetings in pre-construction or during construction, that if if they see that at the end of the day we're on the same page and we have the same goal, a lot of that can be alleviated. Because to your point, I think most people want that outcome. Most people are very reasonable, even if they're upset or they feel that something went sideways or, as you mentioned, over schedule, over budget. I think it's frustrating, but if, there's something to be said about being open and saying, "Hey, we made a mistake. We miscalculated. We missed this," to come in and say, "Hey, let's find a solution moving forward."
Hmm. One of the, kind of the ways that I talk about from as a soldier, having a capacity to do violence, but maintaining, for me personally, with my religious kind of beliefs backing this up, is a meekness, which is having that capacity but keeping it under control. And so ultimately, we're not talking about a military raid here when you're dealing with clients, but I apply the same mindset in the sense that I have an extraordinary amount of capacity and skill and professionalism, and I may be able to use an argumentation and a logic to try to get them to be wrong or whatever. But that meekness or that ability and that professionalism to say we're going to own what what we did wrong, even if they use it against us, because we want to be it, own it, and but at the same time be solution oriented. And so I think that that's kind of that meekness mentality and that realizing that and I've talked about this before too. Like I a high stakes situation for me in business is not the same as the high stakes situations that I experienced on the battlefield. And so I realized that I had I don't know if I talked about this on Modern Craftsman or not, but when I was in a multi-year lawsuit, um, and that gave me my I say is gives me my master's in construction and my MBA. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars and go get a degree, or you can go through a tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees and get a similar education, I guess. And I remember being in the courtroom for one of the initial hearings and just having a physiological response that I did not have when I had machine guns going off in my face, when people were lobbing grenades at me. And I just kind of had this moment of introspection, like, just why am I so, why do I have such a heightened heart rate and such a loss of essential physiological control? And it's because it was a different type of risk that I was used to. It was I think the second year of my business, third year of my business. We were living in that historic mansion that we restored as a family. I paid almost my last dollars to the subs, and when things were going foul, because I owed it to my guys and didn't have my contract in place, didn't do a good job managing clients. There's just so many things I can look back and legitimately own that I screwed up. And I recently had a couple clients get into the same level with the project. And I was able to go in and have the discussions, make the concessions, and get to the finish line. And I kind of was able to look to reflect and say, okay, like year 8 of business, Nathan, versus year 2 of business, Nathan, is a completely different person. And these situations would have 100% ended in a similar situation, but I was able to take those experiences, my new mindset, and focus on them. And I think, there's benefit of going into some of these negotiations with team members and then saying, look, these are kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to resolve this, and then let's do. The military calls it an after action review. Let's sit down as a team and let's really hot wash this thing. What do we mess up? And then even being for me as the owner, being able to ask subordinates to say, how'd you think that went? What'd you notice? And then realizing that they have some pretty keen insights on, he noticed like this one particular guy. It's like, look, I'm gonna knock my fee off the final electrical draw, and it's just gonna be what, and that just that little concession, and then my team member was able to be like, right, it was like no budging, like nasty, like screaming kind of thing on their side. I'm remaining calm, and then I gave this little concession. He was like, that was the moment, that you were able to, you gave, and it just, the whole situation flipped. And so even to be able to look back and be like, that was probably 40 minutes in, and I didn't really want to give it. I was like, I'm going to keep pushing this a little bit longer because we did the work. This is what, from the businessman perspective, like, this is due to me. I'm not going to let this guy, but also realizing you can't go in sometimes with these people and concede the first 5 minutes, and realize that we were able to, the other side of it is we're in a really small town. Our county has 100,000 people, and you're running into these people all the time. and I have a couple people that owe me money here from early on, and they got to run away from me in Lowe's. They got to run away from me. They got to duck me. And when I run into them at the country club, when I run it, like, it's so nice to not be looking over your shoulder, like you're going to run into people, and to know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with the final result and that they're happy about it. It's being okay to realize, like, before God, I'm good with how we handled this, and I'm gonna move on, and they will have to answer for it at some point. I think that, and just being realized, like, the moving forward, getting past it. My wife and I have a saying, bless and release, like that's literally being out of capacity, where you can be like, yep, you're miserable. I'm really sorry about that. I'm moving on, like, and even counseling your people, just like, don't let them pull you into it. Just get in there, get it done. And, and then at the same time, like, all right, if it's going to be that hard, I got to figure out how to make more money for that. Like, I got to get my margins right, and or get my pipeline so full that I don't have to take a job like that again.
I love that, because I mean, in some ways, I feel like you have an unfair advantage over us, Nathan, because you have your military experience, which I want to get into, but I think what's interesting about that example you gave is, I think a lot of people listening would be like, okay, Nathan, it's one thing to be battling for your life or have, grenades or shots coming at you, as opposed to a legal battle. But to your point, it's like mentally, the mindset, the tools, the preparation was different for you at that time, for your military experience, I'd imagine. And so, you're prepared how to compartmentalize and, focus. Whereas anyone that's had litigation holding over them, or the outcome unknown, it can wear on you, like just emotionally, the stress of a lawsuit, the stress of letting someone down, the stress of miscommunication, whatever it may be. And to your point, I think there's a lot with perspective. I mean, something for me is one of my favorite quotes ever is, I complained because I had no shoes until I saw a man that had no feet. And it's like so
Mm-hmm.
many times, there's certain things that we complain, whether it be temporal or physical, but um, there is something to be said about making the most of who we are. And so, with your perspective, Nathan, I mean, I do want to get back to that because if I'm not mistaken, were you a Green Beret? Is that what you had mentioned? Is
I
that
was a
right?
ranger.
A Ranger, Army
Yeah, yeah,
Ranger.
yeah.
Okay. So, what did it take for you? I mean, did you plan to go into the military? Was Army Ranger always the focus you wanted to be? And then in addition to that, the training. What did the training look like to become an Army Ranger?
Well, I think I didn't really have a plan to go in the military. I was actually kind of on the track to go to college, become an engineer. That's what my dad's education was, and I kind of I think had a mistaken mindset about the military. It's kind of like, oh, that's something that you do when you're too dumb to get into college, like, and I think it's a similar stigma might
Or
be
construction?
around construction, correct?
Right.
And so but I met somebody at church that was a ranger and was an officer and he was instrumental in my life and seeing him and the way that he carried himself and basically he just said, hey, I saw Black Hawk Down when I think it was a senior in high school when it came out or junior into my senior year, something like that. And so that definitely our senior trip for was to Manhattan in September of 2001. And so the actual terrorist attacks happened, and we were there about 3 weeks later. And there was a discussion about, I think it may have been 2 weeks later, where we should still go on the trip. And the mayor at the time said, "Hey, we need tourists to come back. Like, we need you guys to come spend money in the city. Like, economically, we're hurting." And so we elected to go. I can remember being very moved by standing. I mean, Ground Zero is still smoking when we were down there walking around, just seeing that devastation, the Black Hawk Down movie. So I kind of always grew up playing in the woods. I had, camo and toy guns and was just playing, but kind of was like, yeah, I mean, this is fun to do, but I'm going to have to go be a man and do college and get a job and all that. So meeting this guy at church, having discussions with them over dinner and things and being like, ooh, okay, he was talking to me about kind of a more accurate picture of what military service was. And I can remember my parents were on vacation and I got everything together. I went and saw the recruiter and I knew I was basically going to have to pitch the military course of action over college to them. So I did all the homework, I got all the info, got all the pamphlets, tried to basically get every question that my parents were going to ask me prepared and said, I want to do this. And it was kind of one of the first times that my father was like, we're not going to make the decision for you. You're old enough. This is going to be something. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, it's on me. And he's like, I'm going to help you ask the right questions, but you're going to have to make the decision. And I essentially I worked a congressional campaign for the summer out of high school, and then went into the Army basically the winter after I graduated high school. And I got that kind of tidbit like, hey, at that time it was 2002, 2003 is when I went in, February 2003. And so the war in Afghanistan was kicking off. The ultimatum was given to Saddam Hussein while I was in basic training. And I remember being in basic training thinking the whole war is going to be over before I even get done with my training, because I think it's like 13 weeks or so of basic training, boot camp, airborne school, and then you have to go through 3 weeks of what they call Ranger Indoctrination Program, which is basically where they take a regular infantry guy that's been to airborne school, so he's jump qualified, and they basically just torture them for 3 weeks and try to get them to quit. And my understanding is that the Army gives a lot of Ranger contracts out, knowing that they'll end up being able to 80, 90% of them are going to wash out, and then they're going to have an airborne infantry soldier that they can just assign to where the Army actually needs them. And it's just a known kind of recruiting plan. And I actually failed the Ranger indoctrination program the first time going through. It's 3-week program. It's probably 2.5 weeks in. There's like a final 12-mile road march at the end that you have to do with, I think it's 45 pounds on your back at a 15-minute pace. And I showed up late to the formation the night prior, and because I had misheard what time we all had to be back for our formation. So they did the roll call. Spearing wasn't there. They marked me as absent. I came in 15 minutes early for a formation that was held an hour earlier than what I thought. So I was like, I rolled in. There was nobody in the formation area, and I just was like, uh-oh, like something's not right here. And I went into the sergeant on duty, and he was like, guess who's going to somewhere else? Guess who's getting dropped? And they basically formed us up to do the road march the next morning. It was basically the last measurable thing before you graduate. And they basically were like, where's Spearing at? And I was like, right here, Sergeant, and they're like, you sure you want to do the 12 miles? Like, we're just going to drop you as soon as you get done. And I said, well, am I dropped right now, Sergeant? And he's like, nope, you're not. And I was like, well, I guess I'm doing 12-mile road march, And so I did the 12-mile road march, and I think I was like second or third to come in. And so I'm like, maybe because I was so fast, they're going to be like, all right, well, you're strong enough. Well, the sergeant was like, well, they need good rucksack guys at the 82nd, I guess. And they brought us all back to the barracks. They brought me in and they dropped me. And they said, you're dropped. But do you want to recycle? Do you want to try to do this again? And I was like, absolutely. And they're like, you want to go through all 3 weeks of this again?
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, I'm like, absolutely. And they were like, okay, so basically everybody in my class, the Rangers have a tan beret, which was different than what the regular Army. And it's kind of like when you're walking around post, everybody sees, oh, that's a Ranger over there. It's like a different uniform, and same like with the Green Berets. If Green Beret's walking around, he's got a different color than the Army has, and they're seeing that. And so you have that pride. So my whole class got issued their tan berets to fit them and be ready to graduate. And I got moved to the barracks to start day one with the next class. And I've had several of those kind of experiences in the military. I think the one liner is "failed my way to the top" is kind of that would describe my military career. And so, and some of them have been massive failures. I think I talked about some of that with Nick and Tyler, but basically having that sense of dignity and pride, in a sense, in a false pride in your performance that's been stripped away kind of so many times, and publicly. This is in front of 25, 30 students. We had maybe 200. Initially whittled it down. So there's like 20, 30 of us left. And then they drop me in front of everybody, start me again. You move into barracks with a bunch of people, and they're like, oh, you're a guy that didn't pass. It's like I've done 2.5 weeks of something that they never did, but I'm the one that's viewed by all these guys that are about to start as like, oh yeah, that guy's a turd. He can't even make it through, so you're having to kind of get that. And there's a lot of experiences like that the military does, and it kind of just strips away any veneer or any ability to pretend that you are anything other than that you actually are. And so I think that is that kind of failure, and that and even in high stakes kind of situations has really been the thing that has made all the difference in business. And having kind of felt so inadequate to the task sometimes, and having felt unequal to it, and having it be public. There's nowhere else for the blame to lie. You're the guy that took that bad shot. You're the guy that failed to configure the parachute right, or you're the guy that showed up late. And then having to work through that and push through and persevere And I find that is the kind of the essence of what is enabling me to keep going in business when it's hard. And then, intentionally, fast forward from that lawsuit and the rest of this, be like, this is financial risk. I'm going to still be home at night with my family. I didn't do any criminal activity that's going to get me locked up. The worst case scenario here is money. And if I'm going to let that cause me to be a jerk of a father or husband, when it's essentially just perceived risk. It's not really any kind of, but at the same time has a real physiological effect, stress, and and that's not gone. It's just something that has to be managed through the right mindset. And so I think that's kind of the way that I've tried to retool my risk profile and realize that this is money. It definitely, there could be some real consequences. There can be, there's the bankruptcy. There's, the not having your house that you have or whatever. Although my joke is right now, if everything goes to crap, I can just jump in my bus and they won't find me. Like we'll go hide in the woods somewhere. But yes, it's I think that's really has enabled me to look a client in the eye and say, we screwed that up, and in some ways that I've seen a visible demeanor change in these clients, and they're just like they're like, all right, okay, we got it, we'll trust you, all right, we'll see how it goes, like, hey, we're gonna fix it, that's on me, I'm sorry, and so I think I think there's probably a lot of that in the world that is, oh, that's this guy and he should have done this, and trying to pass the buck to somebody maybe lower in your organization. Although I have recently kind of been a little bit more transparent when a sub doesn't show up. I used to kind of be like, I'm never throwing these guys under the bus. I'm never going to let them know, but now I've kind of been like, hey, yeah, he texted me. And I'm trying to figure out where he's at, like I'll let you know when I find out. Like, there's a little bit more transparency in that, especially with the difficulty to keep all the guys that are really good are booked out. They got full schedules. They're dealing with the same quality of labor and keeping guys to lower level technicians to show up and do the job right. And so there's definitely a little more transparency in that, and just even that goes back to that humanity thing. Like, all right, hey, this guy's not W-2'd to me. If he was W-2 to me, you'd have to be paying his full-time salary. These guys are essentially fractional, and they're good. So we're going to get him. He's going to make it right. I use him on my house. I use him because he honors his work, and we're going to work through it, and we're going to get it. So anyway.
I love the background there, because even how you tie that into, with the legal aspect, where you're like, at the end of the day, if it's about money, does it affect me as a father? Does it affect my happiness? Right. And, there's early on in my career, again, going back to whether it's defensive or things would really get me rattled. There was one of my early podcasts from, one of the top architects here is Mark Candelaria. And he said, what's interesting is, like, us as humans, just part of human nature, Nathan, is like, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So, mistakes you've made, maybe dealings that haven't gone great, projects that probably didn't go great. And you put a lot of pressure on yourself, but us looking at you, we're like, man, look at Transform NC. Look what he's doing. Like, look at his growth, look at his changes, and so a lot of people are not focused on your failures, they're focused on your successes, right? They're looking from what they see, like, oh, Nathan's so successful. Whereas internally, we're putting so much pressure. And so many times we beat ourselves up instead of just saying, what, for me, when things would go south, I'd, not that you're Eeyore mentality, but it's easy to kind of beat yourself up over things like that, instead of kind of knowing that, hey, this is going to pass and we're going to make changes now. We're going to operationally make changes so that we don't, make the same mistake in the future, and, update our SOP, whatever it may be. If you don't mind me asking, before I get to just investment and business side, when you mentioned, you went through this 3-week process twice, so that kind of shows your mental capability, Nathan, to do that. I had a few peers, growing up in San Diego, working on Coronado, Navy SEALs, right? It's all
Mhm.
Navy. Like, my grandfather was in the Navy. And so a few of my buddies ended up being Navy SEALs. A couple of them dropped out of the training. One in particular, he's like, when I was a kid, I remember seeing him like in December, January in Coronado in full fatigues, laying in the shore at the shore break, in that cold Pacific water in January. It's not fun as that water just hits you, comes in, hits you, and then goes washes away. And to sit there where you're not fully submerged and it's just hitting you, then going, and the wind's blowing, and you see him chattering. But he said it was when it's like 1 a.m. and they dropped him from a helicopter a couple miles offshore and said swim back in. He's like, yeah, I'm out, tap out. But what about for you? When you look at those 3 weeks, what was probably the most difficult, like either mentally or physical thing you had to do?
Well, I was when I joined the army, I was 165 pounds, and carrying weight was,
Heavyweight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was six. I think I might have even you know grown a half inch or so, but yeah, I was over 6 feet tall, 165. So when you threw 50 pounds of gear on me, I was gassed. Like it was definitely um it was definitely hard, and realizing that I actually had didn't know how to size my load carrying equipment right, and we did an 8 mile road march is one you did, and the actual kidney pad of the rucksack rubbed the metal hook into my back and like cut
Oh,
cut me like about an inch or two, kind of rubbed raw because of just the reps of that rucksack rattling on me. And that was first time through the course doing the 8 miler. And I was like, didn't really know. I was new. Like, how does this fit? And you're like getting yelled at and then kind of single file line. And so I had that kind of cut. And then I was like, man, I can't let them know, that I got this incision in my back, because they'll probably medically drop me. They'll be like, oh, you're like, they just have enough people that they're just like, get out of here. Like, you're obviously soft, even if it's legitimate. And so I had that, and it actually developed like this abscess in there, like healed up
oh
and
my
had a thing. It
God.
was like right where my kidney pad is rubbing, and I was able to get the metal part and adjust it to where the metal wasn't there. But that happened and so basically I kind of had to go through that the rest of the first 3 week thing. And then I'm like, well, I can't talk to the medics yet because I got to go back through 3 more weeks. And I
Oh,
remember literally as soon as I passed the 12 miler, and they're like, they would do sick call in the mornings and say, who's got issues, whatever, go see the medic. And they're basically like, no issues, like we're good, like I'm gonna be fine, like you don't need it. And so I remember very vividly being like, as soon as we got done with all the different gates that you had to pass to actually graduate and get assignment in Ranger Battalion, they're like, first sick call, they're like, hey, and I'm like, I got a issue, and they were like, all right, Nate, come over here. And I like showed them, and they were like, what the heck? Like they basically, don't really know what you're going to say, but they're like, dude, that is not good. That's nasty. Like, you got to get that dealt with, and ended up, getting like basically a minor surgery to kind of remove what had kind of the scar tissue and the stuff that had happened there. And then maybe that's not the hardest thing, in intensity wise, but just having kind of that mentality that's like, I don't really care what the bodily physical damage that's going to be brought upon me. I will not let anybody know this is happening, and I'm going to get through it. And just having that, and I think I have that in business too. Like, I'm basically thinking, you don't see all the other people that are going under in
mhm.
business. When you're in doing Ranger indoctrination program, they put us, on this, asphalt thing. We're all doing flutter kicks or push-ups, and they're doing it in cadence, and they're running around, they're screaming at you, and you're just basically complete muscle failure, barely able to hold stuff up, drop, like nobody's able to hold any of it. And they're basically like, hey, we're going to keep doing this until 5 guys quit, you know? and so they would just, it'd be hours, you know, that they would do this to you and make you run and make you drag stuff and just abuse you, because they're basically, it's and I'm pretty sure that if you went to their like schedule, they had that booked. Like this is going to be a 6-hour block where two guys are just going to smoke the candidates, and that's where we're going to get rid of, you know, the 10% that we at these different gates. And when you see the fifth guy quit, you know, and they're like immediately, like essentially they're reinforcing it. All right, yep, sweet, everybody get recover, you know, you're good, like you can stop. And so you see those guys quit that's building that camaraderie of the guys that are still in and that graduate together and are able to look back. You know, if you Google Ranger Doc Creation Program, there's Rangers sitting around with microphones just talking about how awesome they were and how hard it was and all this kind of stuff. Like it's building this reality that not everybody made it and not everybody has what it takes to get where you are. And it's a real knowledge that you start out with 225 guys and 30 graduate, you know, and those statistics are real in business too. They're probably even more, and guys are quitting. It's getting really hard. I'll just, you know, and I you probably are at the point where you don't think about this, but I still feel like I think, oh man, I might go get in a job somewhere, you know, like,
oh, we've all thought that. Trust me, that doesn't change.
Yeah. It's like, man, I'm pretty good at my level. I could probably go and get a pretty nice salary working for somebody. I got drive, you know, and realizing like, nope, I'm not going to quit. Like, I'm going to hate working for that. I mean, I just started Cody Sanchez's book, The Main Street Millionaire or whatever. It said, this is dedicated to a former terrible boss, you know? And she's like, behind every entrepreneur, there's a former terrible boss that drove you, you know? And I had a long discussion with my kids about it, like the other day too. It's like, do you have bosses? And I'm like, I had a lot of bad bosses, like a lot of them, you know, which sometimes usually means you're the one that's got the issue. When you have a lot of bad people, you're like, everybody around me, he's a jerk, you know? But the military did give me that, a lot of lessons in leadership that are positive, but there are so many negative ones too, that you're able to viscerally be like, I'm not going to be that guy. You know, I'm not going to throw my guys out for that. I'm in understanding that hierarchy and that chain of command and the loyalties. And that's hugely, hugely helpful. I think in that, and I recently had a sub say something to the client and make them kind of spin on the weekend about something. And I was just like, I kind of started texting him like, hey man, like keep your mouth shut about that. You know, like we can resolve this. I'm the one that brought you on I'm the one that brought you on the job, and this is not an issue, and we can get it fixed. And we take problems away from our clients. We don't give them problems. And you gave her a problem on the weekend, and then she turned around and gave me a problem. So you gave me the problem, and it's already snowballed, you know. And that was one of those situations where like the texts started to get a little bit sideways, and I was just like, why am I expecting this subcontractor to understand chain of command, hierarchy, the client, the mission, if I haven't trained him on that? If I haven't gone through and done and that's the thing too, is you get these subcontractors that don't have the same. They have, obviously they're partners in what we're doing, and they are at a similar level in their particular trade, but then realizing too the need to train. Hey, when there is an issue, here is who you call when this is happening, you know, and it's not because we're trying to hide anything and we're trying to sweep it under the rug. It's just literally that we want to set up a situation where we deliver the end state to them. And one of the guys older business guy I sat down with, just said, make it look easy, you know? And so that's kind of the way that I talk with our Like, we don't need to tell them how. And I think a lot of construction marketing can be, look at how hard this is and look at how awesome I am doing these hard things. And from a brand perspective, that's not, you don't want to be the hero in this. Like, your client is the hero. You're helping, you are Obi-Wan, and the client is Luke, and you're guiding them through to that end state. And that's a um they don't need to know how hard it is. Make it look easy. Make them think that it was and that, I think there are definitely times to say, look, we're struggling with this. I'm trying to get a fix to it. We got it, in a sense. But a lot of the time, I'm kind of iterating that. It's like, make it look easy. Get in there and make it look easy. Tell me how much to make it look easy. Like, this is what we got to do. And then it's obviously, it's, the deal. There's things are going to go wrong every possible way that they can. I mean, I literally was driving by the job and I was like, man, I'm a little bit behind. I was like, no, I got to poke my head in. And the flooring crew was literally installing the floor on over the top of the wrong floor downstairs. It was an attic remodel, and the flooring subs. And I literally did the call with the lead, the office guy. It's like, hey, to go in, here's the code. Second door to the right upstairs. That's where the how you get up to the attic. I roll in there. They've ripped out all the quarter round in the whole downstairs, and they're doing floating floor over the top of hardwoods that are down there, and they've undercut the jams. And I'm like, what are y'all doing? And he's like, well, my paper says kitchen, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know how that paper that you're holding says that, but I'm telling you, it's upstairs, and then having to text the client right away. Hey, I'm not sure how this happened. We had a conversation about it. Somehow the crew lead showed up, had the wrong info. We're going to make it right, and those situations that you're just like, man, I look back. I don't see how we need to do any kind of process change, because I talked to the guy. It's inside that company, but the reality is like, probably need to sit down and be like, hey, let's do an AAR. How can I help you? What do I, that's also where running a smaller operation where I'm kind of all wearing all the hats is a downside. But where it costs a lot in time and mistakes if you don't have the eyes on it. And this was for a military client. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going into construction after I get out of the military, and I'm like, yeah, it is. It's pretty chaotic out here, man. Like, it is for sure.
Yeah, chaotic to say the least. Something where we align, which kind of touches on all these things, over what you explained from early on to now. Why have you continued to invest? I know for you, you're big on investing in your business. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I
Just
think
continued education, networking, all the things.
yeah, I think that there's I want to continually be more of the kind of person that can learn from other people's mistakes. And I think that I have realized as you consume, these different podcasts from industry professionals, a lot of times you're like, okay, it's not just me, and it's just hard out here, and so that's bad. But at the same time, if I can get these little bits of knowledge from guys that have been there before and incorporate it earlier, and from the military perspective, so we do land navigation, and you have a compass and you have a bearing, and you're basically, it's a trained exercise. You plot a bunch of grids out in hundreds of acres of woods, and they have a little punch that you get at each point, and so you get all these grids, and you got to get 5 out of 7 points to pass that particular gate. And if you sit down and plot all these points, and then you set your compass a couple degrees off, it may not be a big deal if you've gone only 500 yards or something like that. But if you're doing a 1.2 2 kilometer movement, and you're a couple degrees off, you're hundreds and hundreds of feet away from your destination. And so I think that that's essentially how I view education. Is I may not need to make a 180-degree change to my business, but I maybe could make a 1 or 2 degree adjustment, that when you draw that out, for business, time is that distance that you're walking. And if I can just make a couple of degrees, it's going to make, exponential difference in where I am 2, 3, 4 years from now. And so that's, and realizing that it's worth taking the time and spending the money when it is expensive and it's difficult to get away. And we actually had a my wife's like, you scheduled that coalition trip before we even talked about it, and I was like, nope. I scheduled it about 90 seconds after we talked about it, because I was definitely like, this is a big thing. This is time away. And the weekends are definitely, I do a really good job of telling my client, my way that I say it is, my wife works, and she's a stay-at-home mother, and her work is my kids and homeschooling them. She's a musician for our church and everything. So she has additional responsibilities and things that she's part of. But I just say, hey, my wife works. I take care of the kids in the evenings, and it's to give her the space and time to, she's making dinner, but she's also she's able to listen to a podcast. She's able to practice music or do these things. And I create that buffer for her. And I don't work. And then they say, what about Saturday? No, I work for my favorite client on Saturday because I'm building our house or we do a remodel, and they like that. And then what about Sunday? Sunday's God's, and I have never really had an issue with people because they won't ask their doctor to see them on Sunday. They won't ask their attorney to see them on Sunday. And I think that we have as trade professionals think that we have to do that. It's just what's done. It's like, no, you create that, you educate them, and you set the standard early, and you let them know, like, hey, feel free, but you'll be getting a response within the next business day, and carving out that space for the family. But yeah, so it was one of those things where I was like, this is definitely a Saturday, Sunday. We're building our house. We got a working farm. Hey, I really feel like I need to go do this. And she said, okay. And I was like, submit, like, and coming back, it was also beneficial because, I would say it was nice for me to be like, I figured out about 85-90% of this stuff hard knocks way, but these 5-10% nuggets that I got, this is awesome. Like, this is definitely 3 or 4 degrees of more accurate. And I got a part-time coordinator now, and I got just mood boards are getting made. Meetings are happening with clients with picking out plumbing fixtures that I'm not having to go to. And I'm just like, man, this is incredible. And I think that's my 2025 for me is going to be my who, not how year. I don't know if you've read that book, but essentially the premise is that you got to find who's people and then let them do the how instead of worrying about the how. And so I think that was what the insight that hanging out with you guys gave me, is that there are people out there that want to work in an organization that's doing what we're doing, that have particular talents that I need. And, and I literally just threw that out, and I got like 3 or 4 applications, and one rose to the top, and even talked to her like, hey, this is where we're at with the project cycle. I want you to be 1099 right now, but this is as we build our capacity, we're going to bring you in house, and this is how we're going to build it out. And so, that I don't think I would not have gotten that nugget. And it was literally when you were like, hey, look at my task org, all my project coordinators are ladies, and I was just like, why did I not think of that? My wife is so organized and runs our house, and it keeps me. I mean, we had a conversation last night. I'm like, babe, you just got to give me a list, like, and you put it in priority. And when I have an hour, at the farm, I'll take care of it in order of
Mhm.
precedence. And you can move that list around. Just let's come up and women are just so organized. And even the clients often are, it's the wife that's all over it. For sure, there's some money stuff, but they're on your case about the way the tile's being laid, whether it's clean or not. And so it's huge. Nugget that I got, probably one of the most significant nuggets, was like, okay, the PM needs to be a woman, and we're going to call her coordinator because we're going to bridge the design gap. And I can't wait to implement this. And it's already making huge difference. I'm so stoked about it.
I love it. It's incredible. And Nathan, I mean, it's just, I appreciate the passion and time you've given. I know how busy you are. And I'm sure anyone listening, they can just hear the authenticity, right? Of who you are as a father, husband, business owner, ex-military. Thank you for your service. Can't leave this episode without thanking you. So on a side note, what do you do for fun?
We have a working farm. We have a milk cow that just calved. So we have a couple pigs. We got chickens. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's fun, but I've kind of embraced that if I'm not working, I'm really not happy. Like if I'm sedentary, and I think we were talking about this a little bit, it's just like working hard is therapy. And so it's a different type of work, and building out. I mean, literally my son and I ran almost a mile of wire for our invisible dog fence because we got some livestock guardian dogs to kind of help with the bobcat and coyote population around the farm so that we don't have the same threats. And just realizing, like, I'm carving out and I'm working and I'm creating, and we have 54 acres, and we're just building that into a dream place for the family, and also just to create a spot to have personal interactions with people and serve them good food. And so that's where the passion is, and building that particular place out, with the boys, with my sons, and giving them hands-on experience with trades and hard work. And so yeah, I basically eat, sleep, breathe, work all the time. But we're building something that we're very excited about, and I think the end state of having it, the vision for it, and actually building it together as a family is what we're excited about.
That's incredible. Nathan, you've been amazing. Where can our listeners find you?
I have transform_NC at transform_NC on Instagram. And they, my wife and my bio are in that. I'm very much about keeping business and personal life kind of melded in that authenticity. So if they go to @transform_NC, they'll find I'm at the Spearing on Instagram. And I actually have a podcast called Life on Target, where I talk about the kind of the intersection of faith, family, business, and community. And so we talk about kind of homeschool education, the mentality of why we built the farm, small business, and things like that. I haven't put out very many episodes in the last year and a half or so, because I kind of realized that I need to pause my podcasting and get kind of things built, and get a couple more coordinators hired. But there's a lot of probably I think I have 80 something episodes there, kind of walking through our mentality and what we focus on as a family. So if they're particularly a glutton for what we got going on, they can go to spearing.co or look up Life on Target, or any of the podcast platforms.
Well, Nathan, thank you. Appreciate the friendship and relationship, and you making time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.